Get your filthy hands off that merchandise before I call the police and have you arrested for shoplifting." Jessica Crawford's voice echoed through the Crawford luxury boutique like a thunderclap, her face twisted with rage and disgust as she towered over Amara Williams, who knelt on the cold marble floor, desperately trying to gather her scattered shopping bags, personal items, and shredded dignity, while 30-plus customers formed a gleeful circle around the spectacle, their phones thrust forward like weapons, recording every humiliating second with the predatory excitement of people witnessing a public execution. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to steal from a store you clearly can't afford to shop in, you pathetic excuse for a customer." Jessica sneered with venomous satisfaction, deliberately lifting her designer heel and crushing it down onto Amara's cracked iPhone as it skittered across the pristine floor, the sound of splintering glass punctuating her cruelty like an exclamation point. The destroyed device had been buzzing relentlessly with its 11th missed call in 14 minutes. Urgent calls from board members, executives, and most desperately, from her 16-year-old daughter Zoe. But Amara was too overwhelmed by the crushing humiliation to even attempt reaching for the broken pieces, too consumed with trying to salvage what little remained of her dignity as security guards moved closer like vultures, their hands resting ominously on their radios, while the mob of onlookers pressed in tighter, their cameras capturing every moment of her degradation with the bloodthirsty enthusiasm of Romans watching gladiators die in the Colosseum. Time was running out with merciless precision. Zoe's high school graduation ceremony was starting in exactly 53 minutes, and the custom $7,000 dress that Amara had ordered 3 months ago as a surprise for her daughter was supposed to be ready for pickup today. The very reason she'd entered this nightmare dressed in simple clothes to avoid drawing attention to herself. But what none of them knew, not Jessica with her sadistic grin, not the jeering customers recording her pain, not the uncomfortable security guards, not even the teenage employees watching in frozen horror, was that in exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds, this same manager would be stripped of her position, escorted out in handcuffs, and begging for mercy from the very woman she was now destroying. But first, the systematic humiliation was about to descend into depths so unimaginable that it would haunt Jessica Crawford for the rest of her miserable life. If you've ever been judged by your appearance or treated unfairly because of who you are, you need to hear this story. Hit subscribe because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Type justice in the comments if you believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look. You're about to witness the most satisfying revenge story of the year. 4 hours earlier, at 11:30 a.m., Amara Williams had been sitting behind the mahogany desk in her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Crawford Industries tower, the same building that bore the name of the retail empire she now commanded as Chief Executive Officer, a position that controlled over 300 stores across 12 states and employed more than 15,000 people. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to conduct an undercover visit to Crawford Luxury Boutique, the flagship store that not only bore her company's name, but served as the crown jewel of a retail dynasty she'd inherited just 8 months ago when the company's founder, Harold Crawford, had shocked his entire family by bequeathing his life's work to his brilliant protege rather than his own blood relatives. But today, she wasn't dressed like a CEO commanding a billion-dollar empire. Today, she had deliberately chosen to wear faded Levi's jeans with a small tear at the knee, a plain white cotton t-shirt from Target, and well-worn Nike sneakers that had seen better days. With her natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail secured with a basic elastic band, she'd stripped herself of all the usual markers of wealth and power. No designer jewelry, no luxury handbag, no expensive watch, except for one piece she couldn't bring herself to remove, a modest Timex watch her late father had given her for her 16th birthday, which she kept carefully hidden beneath the sleeve of an old cardigan that had belonged to her mother. The plan had been elegantly simple, yet potentially revolutionary. Visit her stores completely incognito to experience firsthand how they truly operated when they thought no one important was watching. To discover the real truth behind the carefully sanitized reports that crossed her desk every month. Her executive assistant, Monica, had strongly suggested announcing the visits in advance, allowing stores to prepare and put their best foot forward. But Amara had insisted on maintaining the element of surprise. How else will I know how my employees really treat people? She'd argued during their morning strategy meeting. How else will I discover if we're living up to the values we claim to represent? Or if we're just paying lip service to diversity and inclusion, while discrimination happens right under our noses? What made this particular visit even more significant was the timing. She'd been receiving an increasing number of formal complaints about Crawford Luxury Boutique specifically, with customers reporting incidents of discrimination, profiling, and degrading treatment based on their appearance, race, and perceived economic status. The reports from store management painted a completely different picture. They claimed customer satisfaction was at an all-time high, that their staff was thoroughly trained in inclusive customer service, and that any complaints were isolated incidents blown out of proportion by overly sensitive customers. Today, Amara would discover which version of reality was actually true. Her phone had been buzzing constantly throughout the morning with calls from her executive team, board members, department heads, and most importantly, from her 16-year-old daughter Zoe, who was preparing for her high school graduation ceremony that afternoon. "Mom, where are you? Did you remember to pick up my dress? The ceremony starts at 4 p.m. sharp, and I still need time to get ready." Read the increasingly frantic text messages. "I'm handling something crucial for the company, sweetheart," Amara had replied. "I promise I'll be there with your dress in plenty of time. This is something I have to do." The graduation dress was more than just an outfit. It was a symbol of everything Amara had worked to achieve since her father's sudden death when she was just 12 years old. Growing up in a single-parent household, watching her mother work 3 jobs to keep them afloat, Amara had made a promise to herself that her own daughter would never want for anything, would never have to worry about whether they could afford the important moments in life. The custom $7,000 dress represented not just luxury, but the fulfillment of that promise, the tangible proof that she'd succeeded in breaking the cycle of financial struggle that had defined her own childhood. Amara had built her remarkable career on the foundation of keeping promises, no matter how difficult they became to honor. After earning her MBA from Wharton on a full scholarship, she'd started her own consulting firm specializing in retail transformation, developing innovative strategies that helped struggling companies revolutionize their customer experience while building inclusive, profitable business models. Her reputation for turning around failing enterprises had eventually caught the attention of Harold Crawford, a retail visionary who'd been searching for someone capable of modernizing his traditional, family-owned business without sacrificing the quality and service that had made it successful. Their partnership had been transformative for both of them. Under Amara's guidance, Crawford Industries had embraced digital innovation, expanded into new markets, and most importantly, had begun the complex work of creating truly inclusive retail environments. When Harold had unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack 6 months ago, the business world had been stunned by the contents of his will. He'd left his entire company to Amara rather than to any of his own family members. Recognizing that she represented the future of retail while his relatives represented its problematic past. But today, walking into the boutique, dressed in clothes that cost less than what some customers spent on a single accessory, she was just another Black woman trying to shop in an upscale store, another person whose worth would be judged solely by her appearance rather than her character, accomplishments, or the content of her bank account. As she'd prepared to leave her office for the undercover visit, Amara had stared at her reflection in the executive washroom mirror, seeing not the powerful CEO who commanded respect in boardrooms across the country, but the 12-year-old girl who'd been followed around stores by suspicious security guards. The teenager who'd been ignored by sales associates who assumed she couldn't afford their merchandise. the young professional who'd been treated with barely concealed contempt when she dared to shop in upscale establishments. Today, she would discover if her own company was perpetuating the same discrimination she'd experienced throughout her life, or if they were truly living up to the inclusive values she'd worked so hard to instill. Jessica Crawford, the 34-year-old distant niece of the company's late founder, had been consumed by a toxic cocktail of rage, entitlement, and bitter resentment for the past 8 months, ever since the reading of Harold Crawford's will had shattered her world and revealed that her uncle had chosen to leave his billion-dollar empire to an outsider rather than keeping it within the family bloodline, where she believed it rightfully belonged. Every single day she spent managing the boutique was a humiliating reminder of what had been stolen from her. Every customer interaction an opportunity to exercise the only power she had left in a world that had rejected her presumed inheritance. Growing up as part of the Crawford family dynasty, Jessica had been raised with an intoxicating sense of entitlement, constantly reminded by her parents that she was destined for greatness, that the family business would eventually be hers to control and shape according to her vision. She'd spent her entire adult life positioning herself as the heir apparent, earning her MBA from a prestigious university, working her way up through various positions within the company, and cultivating relationships with board members who she believed would support her inevitable ascension to the CEO position. When Harold had passed away unexpectedly, she'd been confident that the will would formalize what she saw as her birthright. Instead, it had delivered the most devastating blow of her life. The appointment of Amara Williams as CEO hadn't just been a professional disappointment, it had been a personal humiliation of epic proportions. How could her own uncle choose some outsider, some consultant who had no family connection to the business, over his own flesh and blood? The fact that Amara was a black woman only amplified Jessica's sense of injustice. In her twisted worldview, she'd been passed over for someone who represented everything she'd been taught to view as inferior. Over the years, Jessica had developed a sophisticated and insidious system for identifying customers she deemed unworthy of the boutique's rarefied atmosphere. A cruel talent that allowed her to maintain what she called the store's exclusive image, while satisfying her deep-seated need to feel superior to others. She'd become an expert at reading subtle social cues, clothing brands, accessories, mannerisms, speech patterns, even the way people walked, and using those observations to make instant judgments about their economic status, social class, and therefore their right to shop in her domain. Her discrimination toolkit was extensive and carefully refined. Certain customers would be subjected to longer wait times while she helped others first. Expensive items would mysteriously become sold out when requested by people she disapproved of, only to reappear when preferred clients inquired about them. Security guards would be subtly directed to monitor some shoppers more closely than others, and her sales associates were trained through a combination of rewards and punishments to follow her lead in treating different customers according to her prejudiced hierarchy. Those employees who dared to question her methods quickly found themselves facing reduced hours, poor performance evaluations, inconvenient scheduling, and a hostile work environment that made their jobs unbearable until they eventually quit or were terminated for manufactured infractions. Conversely, staff members who embraced her discriminatory approach were rewarded with better schedules, higher commissions, preferential treatment, and advancement opportunities, creating a toxic culture where prejudice was not only tolerated, but actively encouraged and systematically rewarded. Jessica's psychological profile was a textbook case of someone whose deep insecurities and personal failures had metastasized into a pathological need to dominate and humiliate others. Throughout her life, she'd consistently been overshadowed by more successful family members, more talented colleagues, and more accomplished peers, leaving her with a fragile ego that required constant validation through the degradation of people she perceived as vulnerable or powerless. The retail environment gave her a perfect kingdom where she could finally feel superior, where she could sit in judgment of others and find them wanting, where she could exercise absolute power over people's shopping experiences and, by extension, their sense of self-worth. Her cruelty wasn't impulsive or thoughtless. It was methodical, calculated, and deliberately designed to inflict maximum psychological damage. She'd perfected the art of public humiliation, understanding instinctively how to use crowds, witnesses, and social pressure to amplify her victims' shame and helplessness. Each customer she successfully degraded and drove away was a small victory that temporarily filled the gaping void where her self-esteem should have been. Proof that she mattered, that she had power, that she could control other people's destinies, even if she couldn't control her own. Today, when she saw Amara Williams walk into what she still considered her store, dressed in casual clothes that triggered every one of her discriminatory alarm bells, Jessica saw more than just another opportunity to flex her petty authority. She saw a chance to work out 8 months of accumulated rage and resentment on someone who represented everything she'd been taught to despise and blame for her own failures. What she didn't realize was that she was about to destroy not just her career, but her entire future in the most public and humiliating way possible. Amara entered the boutique at 2:47 p.m., immediately struck by the store's elegant atmosphere. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over marble floors, and the scent of expensive perfume hung in the air. She approached the customer service desk where Jessica was reviewing inventory reports. "Excuse me," Amara said politely. "I'm here to pick up a custom dress order for Williams." Jessica looked up slowly, her eyes scanning Amara from head to toe with obvious disapproval. "Williams?" she repeated, making no move to check the computer. "Are you sure you have the right store? Our custom pieces start at $5,000. "Yes, I'm aware of your pricing," Amara replied calmly. "The order was placed 3 months ago. Here's my confirmation number." She handed over a printed receipt. Jessica took the paper with 2 fingers as if it might contaminate her. The system shows this order was prepaid?" She made it sound like an accusation. "How exactly did you pay for a $7,000 dress?" Around them, other customers began to notice the interaction. A well-dressed woman with multiple shopping bags whispered to her companion, "Can you believe she's actually trying to claim she bought something here?" Amara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but maintained her composure. "I used a credit card, same as anyone else. Could you please check if the dress is ready?" Jessica's voice grew louder, clearly intending for others to hear. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to verify this payment before I can release any merchandise. Our custom pieces are quite exclusive, and we've had issues with fraudulent claims before." The implication hung heavy in the air. Several customers had stopped shopping to watch the unfolding drama. A teenage employee named Marcus shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, clearly uncomfortable with his manager's tone. "I understand your need to verify," Amara said evenly, though her hands trembled slightly. "What verification do you need?" "Well, for starters, I'll need to see the credit card used for the purchase, photo ID, and proof of income," Jessica announced, her voice carrying across the store. "You understand, we have to be careful about theft and fraud in this neighborhood." An older white customer nodded approvingly. "Good for you, dear. You can't be too careful these days." Amara's phone buzzed with another call from Zoe. She glanced at the screen, 3:02 p.m., less than an hour until graduation. "Of course," she said, reaching for her wallet. "Here's my ID and the card." Jessica examined both items with exaggerated scrutiny, holding them up to the light as if checking for forgeries. "This card could be stolen," she announced loudly. "I'm going to need to call the bank to verify." "Actually," Jessica continued, her confidence growing with the audience. I think we should have security take a look at this situation. Marco, she called to the security guard. A large man in his 50s approached, his expression apologetic as he looked at Amara. Is there a problem here? This woman is claiming to have paid for a custom dress, but something doesn't add up, Jessica explained. I need you to search her bags and verify she hasn't taken anything. Ma'am, is that really necessary? Marco asked quietly. She has receipts. Are you questioning my judgment? Jessica snapped. I'm the manager here, and I'm telling you this situation requires investigation. Amara's heart pounded as Marco reluctantly approached. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I need to check your bags. The humiliation burned as Amara watched her personal items spread across the counter. Her wallet, keys, chapstick, and a small wrapped gift she'd bought for Zoe. Jessica picked up each item, examining them as if they were evidence in a crime scene. What's this? Jessica demanded, holding up Amara's business phone. This looks expensive. How does someone who dresses like you afford an iPhone Pro Max? It's just my phone, Amara replied quietly, glancing at the screen. 15 missed calls now. Marcus, call mall security, Jessica ordered. I want this properly documented, and someone get me the district manager on the phone. The teenage employee hesitated. Miss Crawford, maybe you should do your job, Jessica cut him off. Unless you want to be looking for a new one. By now, a crowd of nearly 20 people had gathered. Some looked uncomfortable, but others seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. Multiple phones were recording as Jessica held court. I've been in retail for 15 years, Jessica announced to their audience, and you develop an instinct about these things. This woman walks into our store wearing clothes from Target, claims to have spent $7,000, and expects us to just hand over merchandise? I don't think so. A woman in the crowd called out, You're just doing your job, honey. Don't let her guilt trip you. Amara's phone rang again. This time she could see it was her daughter calling. Please, she said softly. I just need to pick up the dress and go. My daughter's graduation. Your daughter's graduation? Jessica laughed cruelly. Let me guess, she's graduating from remedial classes at the community center? Because there's no way someone like you has a child graduating from anywhere that would require a dress from this store. The crowd murmured with a mixture of shocked gasps and cruel laughter. Amara felt tears prick her eyes for the first time. You know what? Jessica continued, emboldened by the reaction. I'm confiscating this phone until we can verify your identity. For all we know, it's stolen too. She grabbed Amara's phone, and in the struggle, it fell to the floor. The screen cracked as it hit the marble. My phone, Amara gasped, dropping to her knees to retrieve it. As she knelt on the cold floor, trying to gather her scattered belongings, Jessica stood over her triumphantly. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to scam honest businesses, Jessica declared. People like you think you can just walk into our store and take whatever you want, but I'm here to protect our real customers from thieves and fraudsters. The gift for Zoe had unwrapped during the struggle, revealing a small silver bracelet with "Congratulations, graduate" engraved on it. Jessica picked it up, examining it with mock concern. Oh, how touching, she said sarcastically. Did you steal this too? Or did you buy it from one of those little stands at the mall? Amara looked up from the floor, tears now flowing freely. Around her, the crowd continued to film and whisper. She could hear someone saying, This is going straight to TikTok. Please, Amara whispered. Just let me get my daughter's dress. She's been looking forward to this day for months. Jessica smiled coldly. The only place you're going is out of my store. Security, escort this woman out and make sure she doesn't come back. But at that exact moment, at 3:22 p.m., something shifted in the atmosphere of the boutique. 3 floors above the boutique, in the executive offices of Crawford Industries, Amara's assistant, Monica, was watching the clock with growing concern. The CEO had missed her 3 p.m. board call, and her phone was going straight to voicemail. At 3:23 p.m., Monica made a decision that would change everything. She activated the CEO's emergency location protocol. Within 60 seconds, her computer screen showed Amara's exact location, Crawford Luxury Boutique, ground floor. But according to the system, she should have been in meetings all day. Monica pulled up the store's internal security feed, and what she saw made her blood run cold. At 3:24 p.m., Monica's fingers flew across her keyboard as she initiated Code Black, the company's highest-level emergency response, typically reserved for threats to executive safety. At 3:25 p.m., her first call went to James Patterson, head of corporate security. "Sir, we have a Code Black situation. The CEO is in distress at the flagship store." At 3:26 p.m., Patterson was in his car, racing toward the mall while simultaneously coordinating a full response team. At 3:27 p.m., Monica called David Chen, the company's chief legal officer. "David, you need to get to Crawford Boutique immediately. We may have a massive liability situation developing." At 3:28 p.m., she reached out to Maria Santos, VP of Human Resources. "Maria, prepare for immediate staff suspensions. I'm sending you live footage now." At 3:29 p.m., a final call went to Richard Crawford, chairman of the board and the founder's eldest son. "Mr. Crawford, you need to see this. It's about Amara." By 3:30 p.m., a convoy of black SUVs was converging on Westfield Shopping Center. Private security, company executives, legal representatives, and HR personnel were all racing to address what would become the most significant crisis in Crawford Industries' 60-year history. Inside the boutique, none of this frantic mobilization was visible. Jessica Crawford continued her humiliation of the woman kneeling on her floor, completely unaware that the most powerful people in the company were about to descend on her store. The phone in Amara's hand buzzed one final time. Through her cracked screen, she could see Monica's name. But before she could answer, Jessica grabbed the device again. "I said no phone calls," Jessica snapped. What Jessica didn't know was that the call was already connected and Monica was listening to every word. "You're not going to believe who's about to walk through that door. If you think Jessica is about to get exactly what she deserves, type yes in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed because the next 5 minutes will blow your mind. Tell us below, what would you do if this was your daughter being treated this way?" At 3:31 p.m., the boutique felt like the eye of a hurricane. Amara remained on the floor, her belongings scattered around her. While Jessica basked in her moment of triumph, the crowd of onlookers had grown to nearly 30 people, their phones capturing every moment. "I want everyone to see this," Jessica announced to her audience. "This is what happens when people try to scam our store. We protect our legitimate customers from fraud and theft." Several people in the crowd nodded approvingly. A well-dressed man called out, "Good for you. These people think they can get away with anything." Marcus, the teenage employee, looked increasingly uncomfortable. He kept glancing toward the store entrance, as if expecting someone to intervene. His coworker, Sarah, whispered, "Should we really be doing this? Should we be doing our jobs?" Jessica snapped, overhearing. "Yes, we should, unless you both want to join her on the unemployment line." Outside, the first black SUV pulled into the parking lot at 3:32 p.m. James Patterson stepped out, his expression grim as he spoke into his earpiece. "We're on location, moving to secure the situation now." At 3:33 p.m., David Chen's vehicle arrived, followed immediately by Maria Santos. They conferred quickly in the parking lot before striding toward the mall entrance with purpose. At 3:34 p.m., Richard Crawford's limousine glided into the lot. The 67-year-old chairman had been in this business long enough to know that what he was about to witness would either destroy the company his father built or provide an opportunity to demonstrate the values they truly stood for. Inside the boutique, Amara's phone buzzed again on the floor beside her. The cracked screen showed 3:35 p.m., 25 minutes until Zoe's graduation ceremony. "Please," Hugh whispered one more time. "I just want to pick up my daughter's dress." Jessica's smile was cruel and satisfied. "The only thing you're picking up is a trespassing charge if you don't leave my store right now." But at that exact moment, the boutique's entrance chimes rang out as the first of the executive team stepped through the doors. The transformation was immediate and electric. At 3:36 p.m., James Patterson entered the boutique, his imposing 6'4" frame filling the doorway. His expensive suit and obvious authority caused immediate ripples through the crowd. Behind him, David Chen and Maria Santos followed, their expressions professional but determined. The casual chatter of the crowd died instantly. Phone cameras swiveled to capture these new arrivals, sensing that the dynamic was about to shift dramatically. Patterson's eyes quickly scanned the scene and locked onto Amara, still on the floor surrounded by her scattered belongings. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Jessica, still riding high on her power trip, didn't immediately grasp the significance of these new arrivals. "Excuse me," she called out. "This store is dealing with a security situation right now. I'll need you to wait outside until—" "Ma'am," Patterson interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm going to need you to step away from that woman immediately." The crowd began to murmur with confusion and anticipation. Several people whispered variations of, "Who are these people?" Maria Santos stepped forward, her voice clear and professional. "Everyone, please put away your phones and give this woman some space." An elderly customer in the crowd gasped audibly. "Oh my God," she whispered to her companion. "That's Maria Santos. She's on the news all the time. She's some big executive." The whisper rippled through the crowd like wildfire. "Executive? Which company? Why are they here?" Marcus, the teenage employee, suddenly went pale. He recognized David Chen from corporate training videos. "Miss Crawford," he whispered urgently. "I think those are— I don't care who they think they are." Jessica snapped, but her voice carried less certainty than before. "This is my store, and I'm handling a theft situation." David Chen stepped forward, his expression calm, but his eyes flashing with barely controlled anger. "Miss Crawford, I'm David Chen, Chief Legal Officer of Crawford Industries. This situation is over." The name Crawford Industries hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Phones that had been lowered shot back up as people realized they were witnessing something significant. Jessica's face began to drain of color. "Crawford Industries? But this is just a boutique situation." "This boutique," Chen replied evenly, "is owned by Crawford Industries. And you've just committed what may be the most expensive mistake in our company's history." Phase 3. The identity reveal. At 3:38 p.m., Richard Crawford himself entered the boutique. At 67, he carried himself with the dignity of a man who had built an empire from nothing. The crowd parted automatically as he walked directly to where Amara remained on the floor. The silence was deafening. Richard Crawford knelt down beside Amara, gently helping her to her feet. "Amara," he said softly, "I am so sorry." The crowd erupted in confused whispers. "Amara? Who's Amara? Why does he know her name?" Jessica stared in shock, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "Mr. Crawford, why are you here?" Richard turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying clearly throughout the boutique. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Amara Williams, the Chief Executive Officer of Crawford Industries and the owner of this store." The silence that followed was profound and complete. Then, like a dam bursting, the crowd exploded into chaos. Gasps, exclamations, and the sound of people frantically trying to delete videos from their phones filled the air. Jessica's face went from pale to ashen to green in a matter of seconds. "CEO?" she whispered. But she's dressed like a human being trying to shop in her own store." Richard's voice carried a cold edge that made everyone in the boutique shiver. Maria Santos stepped forward with a tablet, her voice professional and damning. "Miss Crawford, we've been monitoring this situation for the past 15 minutes through our security system and Ms. Williams' phone connection." She held up the tablet, showing the boutique's security footage on a split screen with the phone's audio recording. We have video evidence of harassment, discrimination, theft of personal property, destruction of personal property, false accusations, and what appears to be intentional infliction of emotional distress. David Chen opened his briefcase, pulling out a legal folder. We also have testimonies from at least 12 customers who witnessed your behavior, 3 of whom have already expressed willingness to testify in court. Patterson spoke up, his security background evident in his systematic approach. Additionally, we've documented a pattern of discriminatory behavior based on preliminary interviews with your staff members, who have indicated this treatment is not an isolated incident. Marcus stepped forward, his teenage voice shaking but determined. Mr. Crawford, I've been wanting to report this for months. Miss Crawford tells us to watch certain customers more closely, and she's said some really bad things about people. Sarah nodded vigorously. She made me follow a Hispanic family around the store last week because she said they looked suspicious. I felt terrible about it. Richard Crawford's voice filled the boutique with quiet authority. Jessica, in the past hour, you have discriminated against, harassed, and humiliated the chief executive officer of this company, based solely on her appearance and race. The weight of realization was crushing Jessica visibly. She began to shake as the full magnitude of her actions became clear. But more than that, Richard continued, you've revealed a pattern of behavior that goes against everything this company stands for. You've created a hostile environment for customers and employees alike, and you've exposed us to significant legal liability. Amara, now standing with her dignity restored, spoke for the first time since the executives arrived. Her voice was calm, but carried unmistakable authority. Jessica, how many other customers have you treated this way? How many people have left this store feeling humiliated and unwelcome? Jessica's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The answer was written across her face. Chen stepped forward with official documents. Miss Crawford, you are hereby terminated from Crawford Industries, effective immediately. You will also be facing potential criminal charges for theft and destruction of property, as well as civil liability for discrimination and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Patterson removed Jessica's name tag and store keys with professional efficiency. You're also banned from all Crawford Industries properties. Security will escort you out. At 3:45 p.m., Jessica Crawford was escorted from the boutique by security, passing a gauntlet of cameras and shocked onlookers. Her 15-year retail career was over, along with any hope of future employment in the industry. The crowd that had gathered to watch Amara's humiliation now witnessed her vindication. Several people who had been filming the earlier events approached to delete their videos and apologize, but Amara graciously declined their apologies while accepting their regret. Marcus and Sarah were immediately promoted to assistant managers, their courage in speaking up rewarded with increased responsibility and compensation. The other employees who had participated in or enabled Jessica's behavior were suspended pending investigation. Within an hour, #Jessica Crawford was trending on social media, but not in the way she had intended. The story spread rapidly. Racist manager humiliates CEO of her own company. The most satisfying justice video ever. And how discrimination led to the fastest firing in history. Local news stations arrived at the mall by evening, interviewing witnesses and covering what was being called the retail justice story of the decade. The following Monday, Crawford Industries announced sweeping changes to their retail operations. Immediate policy changes. Zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. Mandatory bias training for all retail employees. Customer advocate programs at every location. Anonymous reporting systems for both customers and employees. Financial commitments: $2 million donated to civil rights organizations. $500,000 scholarship fund for underprivileged students. Free bias training offered to other retail companies. Operational reforms. mystery shopping programs to identify discriminatory practices, customer service standards based on respect and dignity, regular audits of employee behavior and customer feedback, leadership changes, new diversity and inclusion officer appointed, retail manager training completely overhauled, board-level oversight of discrimination complaints. At 4:15 p.m., Amara arrived at her daughter's graduation ceremony, carrying the custom dress that had started the entire ordeal. But more importantly, she carried with her a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of the challenges faced by people who look like her every day. Zoe's graduation was everything Amara had hoped it would be. As she watched her daughter walk across the stage to receive her diploma, she reflected on the day's events. The humiliation had been painful, but it had also revealed problems in her company that needed immediate attention. The bracelet that Jessica had mocked, the one with "Congratulations, Graduate" engraved on it, now adorned Zoe's wrist as she celebrated with her classmates. When Zoe heard the full story of her mother's day, she wasn't angry, but proud. "Mom," she said, "you turned something terrible into something that will help a lot of people. That's what real leaders do." Over the following weeks, Amara received hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories of retail discrimination. Many thanked her for bringing attention to an issue they had experienced but felt powerless to address. Marcus and Sarah became advocates within the company, working with the new diversity and inclusion officer to identify and eliminate discriminatory practices across all Crawford Industries locations. 6 months later, Crawford Industries had become a model for inclusive retail practices. Their stores reported increased customer satisfaction, improved employee morale, and higher profits as they attracted customers who had previously felt unwelcome. Amara used her platform to speak at business conferences about the importance of treating every customer with dignity and respect. She shared her story not for sympathy, but to educate other business leaders about the hidden costs of discrimination. Jessica Crawford never worked in retail again. Her actions had been so widely publicized that no reputable company would hire her. She eventually moved to another state and took a job in an entirely different field, carrying with her the permanent reminder of how prejudice and cruelty had destroyed her career in a single afternoon. The boutique where the incident occurred was renamed the Dignity Store and became Crawford Industries' flagship location for inclusive customer service. A plaque near the entrance read, "Every person who enters here deserves respect, kindness, and dignity, no exceptions." Marcus, now a district manager at just 19, often told new employees about the day he watched his former manager destroy her career through prejudice. "The way you treat people," he would say, "especially when you think no one important is watching, reveals who you really are." The viral video of Jessica's firing continued to circulate as a reminder that in an interconnected world, treating people poorly can have swift and devastating consequences. But more importantly, it became a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever been judged, dismissed, or humiliated based on their appearance. Amara's story spread far beyond retail, inspiring changes in restaurants, hotels, car dealerships, and countless other businesses where customer-facing employees had previously felt empowered to discriminate. The most powerful lesson, however, came from Amara herself in a speech she gave at a national business conference. "That day, I learned that being CEO means more than running a profitable company. It means creating a culture where every person, whether they're a customer, employee, or community member, is treated with the dignity they deserve. Because you never know who you're talking to. But more importantly, it shouldn't matter. Everyone deserves respect." The transformation of Crawford Industries became a business school case study in how to turn a crisis into an opportunity for positive change. But for those who witnessed it firsthand, it was something much simpler, proof that justice, while sometimes delayed, can arrive with swift and satisfying completeness. And for Zoe Williams, Now a freshman in college, studying business and social justice, it became the foundation of her own career goals: to build a world where no one has to endure what her mother experienced that day, and where dignity and respect are not privileges to be earned, but rights to be guaranteed. The story of that 7-minute transformation from humiliation to justice continues to inspire people around the world, reminding us all that real change happens when good people refuse to accept discrimination and inequality as the status quo.